change in the fundraising sector has never been greater. But innovations in technology are evolving faster than our ability to understand them. Are these advances good or bad? Do they have unintended consequences? And what is the application to the global fundraising sector? That's what we're here to find out. Welcome to the Fundraising AI Podcast, your up-to-date resource for responsible AI for the global fundraising community, hosted by Nathan Chappell and Scott Rosenkrantz.
Hey everyone, we're back for another episode of the Fundraising AI Podcast. I'm Nathan Chappell here with Scott Rosenkrantz, back with the juicy AI gossip for the week. So much good stuff. I don't know. I was just making all that up. How do you feel about it this week, Scott?
I thought we were just talking about the Taylor Swift wedding this week.
Yeah, I didn't see that. But I think I've said this before, right? My feed is only AI. So how is it surprising to you? Someone told me there's like soccer going on or something. I'm like, is there? I had no idea. I thought it was like baseball season. I had no idea.
Yeah. My wife keeps me up to date on everything, not AI. But
that's good.
Other than that, I'm just mostly on like adoption studies.
Yeah. No, my feed is,
that's where all my
feed is obnoxious. But I think I saw one picture. This is embarrassing, but I'm so bad with like celebrity faces. You're really good. This is like more your superpower. Not that Taylor Swift would ever find herself in a regular airplane, like a commercial airplane ever, obviously. But if I happen to be sitting next to Taylor Swift on an airplane, I would not know that was Taylor Swift. I just would be like, hi, I'm Nathan. And then I put my headphones on.
What do you do?
Pretend I put my headphones on and pretend that that person doesn't exist, because that's what I do on airplanes. I'm usually first to board because I fly a lot. And literally butt in the seat, headphones on head. That's like in that order.
I think that's actually worse. If you say hi to the person, introduce yourself, then put on headphones, it's like, I acknowledge that you're there, but I'm going to ignore you.
But if she was like in the middle of the seat, she'd be like, oh, excuse me. And like, I'd be like, okay, hi, whatever. No, it sounds so bad because I'm really focused on community in that. But like in airplanes, it's hard to hear. And then like, there's been a few times where I made eye contact and it basically was like a person who was a version of my mom. And then like 4 hours later, you're still literally having the conversation and you're like, oh my gosh, I literally couldn't even get a word in. And so love my mom, but she would do that to any person who sit next to her. So if you sit next to my mom on an airplane, have headphones with you. So
tip
of the week. No, it's just really bad. I'm like celebrity blind entirely to like anything that's probably in any kind of magazine. Like, I don't know, is People magazine still exist? Like something like that.
I feel like I see it in grocery stores and stuff.
So, all right. Clearly, this is an AI podcast and not a podcast on what's happening in the world. All right. So juicy stuff in AI, not juicy. Let's start with Fable, because I know you and I had a Fable kind of experience last week. So for those that don't remember, Fable was a model by Anthropic that came out. The government shut it down within like 5 days because they felt like there were some unsafe things with it. And so they had to put better guardrails around it. It came back about, I guess, a week ago. It's been, I think the beginning of last week, Fable was back. The thing is, I never got to use it the first time because I was like traveling. And so I had this total FOMO. And so like, as soon as it came back last week, I was like, oh, I'm in. Like I jumped in the deep end of the pool. And I can tell you, like, there's a reason why, like, this model is so good. I mean, it's so different than any other model. It's so intuitive, so thorough. I mean, with like massive context window. So finishing, third book right now, N1 Philanthropy. I mean, you and I can think about this, but a year and a half ago, like we were writing nonprofit AI and we were trying to like explore like, oh, is there something that correlates to chapter 3 to chapter 4 that we should be aware of? And it would completely lose track. And I mean, it would completely lose track. Could not even do that. And this is...
It couldn't do word counts.
Oh, yeah.
We'd say like, try to hit your 3,000 words and it'd be like 1,200 words. Like, okay, we got to 3,000.
And you're like, no, it's not. Not even close. And it would just make it up. Fable is so good. I did this like final proof because I've been working on this book for a while. And it's like, oh, by the way, like I did this other verification thing and I realized that your title at UC San Diego is referenced 2 different ways. One says associate, one says assistant in chapters 2 and chapter 7. It wasn't even what I asked it. It was just like, it's so intuitive that it's like ridiculous. And so anyway, it's amazing. So the other thing is very token hungry. So be prepared. if you're going to use Fable, use it for, high compute tasks, things that actually are worthy of something that this document's 190 pages and 64,000 words. So it's a lot to chew on. I could probably do it with a lesser model, but I wouldn't feel as confident about it. But I'm not asking Fable about when's the right time to plant pole beans or whatever for my garden. Use a small language model or one of the lesser models that's built for efficiency. One, the environmental impact, which we'll talk about a little bit, but the other is just you don't need that kind of horsepower to do something that's simple.
Yeah, this is for work that would take days, if not weeks, of a lot of eyes on it, a lot of time blocked off, dedicated to do the type of output that this is creating. This is where you would use that type of stuff.
Yeah.
And the model, because they were pushing a release saying that up until July 7th, which is today, they would offer Fable at a discounted rate.
Yeah.
Right. So everybody was just kind of going crazy trying to use it. Right. And I know at our organization, everybody hit their limits because it was just, it's here.
Yeah.
Why not try it? Let's see all the crazy stuff we could do. And so they did a good job of just giving you a little bit to get you hooked. And then
for sure,
everybody's going to be upgrading their levels to use that all the time.
I mean, our entire team at Virtuous has moved from OpenAI to Anthropic over the last year. And so I think pretty much everyone in engineering, myself, are at $250 basically threshold for Anthropic now. And I burned through that in 4 days. So literally I was slacked last night. I was working on the book and I slacked our IT guy. I'm like, hey, just so you know, I'm at 78%. I'm not going to make it 2 more days. So you need to increase my usage will go back down as soon as I'm done with this book, because I'm not, doing this heavy compute things all the time. But this is saving thousands of dollars, because if you hire a proofer for a book, you're going to spend $3,000 or $4,000. Most likely they're going to use AI anyway, and you're going to spend all this money. And this way I'm going to spend $250 and be done with it in 1 day or 1 hour. So anyway, it's pretty remarkable.
And we've both used proofers before, and
still have typos.
Were there. It was inconsistency. So this can hold the entire book in context all at once.
You know what it did? So this is and it's just so intuitive. It sets up a version of the book itself. So if I make edits, I'm making edits and then I go and I put those edits back in, it will go and reconcile its shadow version of the book with my version of the book. And then it will do a validation to make sure that when I put it in, nothing gets lost. It will literally it confirms word count. It confirms everything. I mean, it's pretty ridiculous. It's so funny because we're at the very, very tail end of this book, and then Fable comes out and I'm like, man, where was this thing a couple months ago? But it is still ridiculous, in how it's the first model I've actually been confident in, because you and I have had so many cases where stuff just goes missing and disappear. And so it's oh, wait, you didn't create a backup of that? Shame on me. This model I still create. I have 50 different backups, but just because of PTSD. But honestly, people should try out Claude Fable. And if you buy the personal account, because, not doing anything that requires privacy or security, you get quite a lot. You get for $20 a month, you're still going to get a lot of usage out of it. I mean, you're both, right? Do you have a enterprise and a personal account?
And a personal.
Okay. Yeah. So we have the enterprise account because obviously the privacy side, but in that enterprise account's a lot more expensive because you're paying for the privacy of that. But anyway, maybe is a good segue really quick into the environmental piece, because I wrote an article. That one ended up being a really long article that it took me longer to write that article than probably any article I've written in the last probably year and a half or so, just because I wanted to be really well researched, and I agonized on producing an article about the environmental impact of AI in a balanced way. And there were a couple of observations from it. Number one is there were a lot of people who were like, man, you're brave, because I've wanted to do this, but I'm not brave enough to write an article about this. But actually more people were just they thanked me for being willing to do it, and also for the balance between it. I think one of the end conclusions was that you can't use the environmental impact of AI as an excuse for not using AI if you haven't audited your environmental footprint that you already have. So the average person who comes up to you and I, literally every single time we do a virtual or in-person session, I mean, when's the last time somebody didn't ask you about the environmental impact right after you're done Like it's never happened. It just always happens, right?
Right. It's one of two questions that everybody asks at every conference.
Yeah. What's the other one?
The other one is, how do you feel about autonomous flying?
Right. Yeah. Those are two. And so like, it's just always like people are dying to get the mic, and it's like, it's interesting. So the article, I wasn't trying to be damning, but the sense of like, if you haven't already audited the fact that on average, you have between 4 and 5 streaming services, like the average person between 4 and 5 streaming services, and the average person scrolls 300 feet on their phone a day, then you really have no right to ask about that without really checking yourself first. Now, with that said, AI is increasing to build more energy or to consume more energy. And so, we've already built a very data hungry society and culture and economy, but the idea that AI is going to accelerate that. So one of the things that the Chronicle Philanthropy called, and I was talking to Rashida this morning about this, she's writing an article on it and asked to speak with me because I just wrote on this. And, one of the things that when I was talking to her, that she's like, well, what can a nonprofit do to help mitigate? Like we say like AI is, a part of, it's a moral responsibility to use AI, but what can a nonprofit do to mitigate their amount of compute that you're using? And, you and I talked about this right before we got on the call, but I don't think a lot of people know that they can switch between models, and they don't understand, if they do understand that, know that the models that are higher on the list, at the top of the list, actually consume more compute. Therefore, they consume more energy. And so one of the things, as I was just talking to Rashida about it, like on the fly, was that educating your team on the difference between high throughput models and small language models and kind of everything in between, and then to correlate which model with which task. So I'm wondering how many people even know or intuitively like, oh, I'm doing a task like, I'm trying to figure out when to plant pole beans versus I'm trying to write a 60-page essay on the correlation between Giving USA and the stock market. And I mean, those are two very different things. So if you want to think about agency and you want to think about what you can do as an end user and what you can do as an organization or a leader, is learn about the differences between the models and use the right model for the right task.
Yeah. And another thing that came up recently for me, because I schedule a lot of tasks to run, right? Like morning briefs, I schedule things to go through, travel a lot, to go through my calendar to see what upcoming travel I have, to book stuff. If you are like me and have those scheduled, schedule those tasks for off hours, right? Just like, your thermostat is running at certain times of the day, like schedule a time for 2:00 in the morning where things are running slower, right? It's going to use less energy. It's going to compete against others. So you're going to be able to like get your work done. And it doesn't matter if it runs at 9:00 in the morning when you're ready, or 2:00 and then you still have it ready the next morning. So try to offload some of the stuff at that time. It's also cheaper for you, right? You're using less tokens, going through it, hitting the limits less frequently. But you've been talking about model routing for a while, right? Whether you use Gemini for this or ChatGPT, like this is a variation of that. Claude has 3 or 4 different models available now, each of them with different levels of thinking and effort applied. And then they have the degraded models of Opus 4.6, 4.5 that you could still go to, right? So there's probably 40 different combinations that you have access to, all within one Claude. But most people, like you said, are just going to whatever is the default and keeping that for easy stuff as well as the most challenging.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you should just become accustomed to is that you open up a prompt, and one of the things is that the last model you use is typically the default. And so I found out that the hard way the other day, because I was using like a low model for something, and then I wasn't even thinking about this, but I started doing this like hard thing, and I'm like, what's going on? Like it just didn't, there was something that was like nagging and it didn't feel right. And it took me like, I mean, honestly, it took me probably like a half an hour of like going back and being frustrated and being like, what's happening? And then I looked down and I'm like, oh, like I'm literally using like, I forget what I was using, like one of the lowest, fastest models. And so I think it needs to become almost that habit. And that idea of model routing that you're referring to is basically just like understanding that, the toolbox in your house has a lot of tools and you use the right tool for the right project. And so, and that might be within a model like Anthropic, Claude. It could be, use the Fable for, which is the new highest model for like the most complex things, and then other models for simpler tasks. And they even give you a little description next to each model of like, this model is, really good for, reasoning, or this one is really good for fast, most things or brainstorming. And then sometimes it might be like, oh, I want to use OpenAI Codex because it's, really good at certain mathematical type functions that, you don't get the same benefit. So just understanding what the different tools do and then leveraging the right tool for the right project.
And also, like we talked about Fable 5 a minute ago, the models are coming out so much quicker than they used to, right? It used to be like 6, 7, 8, 9 months between GPT 3.5 and 3.6 or whatever, right? And now, like, it is just back to back. Whenever we talk about this, I always think about, what was it? Was it Brockman who said a couple years ago on a podcast, like, what you have access to publicly is laughable compared to what we have access to internally. Like the things that they're building that haven't been rolled out yet. So you're talking about these models and the things that are coming out that can manage a 190-page book. Like, it's embarrassing to the people at Anthropic that are building the next version of that.
Well, I remember Sam Altman talking about that one time. He's like, I'm embarrassed about how bad AI is. And I think just in general, even a couple of years ago, yeah, no, for sure. I also think that the other part of that condition is that it's going to make it harder and harder for people to catch up. And so the acknowledgement that like a year and a half, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, if you're like, okay, well, if I decide to use AI in 2022 and it's just a prompt that I ask it questions and it's kind of novel, it's very low risk of not being able to catch up. But AI has progressed so much that even when we're talking about all the different main players and then all the models within those main players and what their capabilities are doing, that's all still very basic stuff. But now when you're talking about actually like vibe coding, having models build things, whether it be websites or apps or whatever, or designing things for you, that just brings you into a whole new thing. So I do feel like, I think there's very little risk of not catching up a while ago. But I think I wrote an article about this in January 2026, is that this is the year that will separate those from the do that don't. Because I think by the end of this year, if you're not like in the game and you're playing around for 30, 60 minutes a day, and you're just like playing and experimenting and staying up on what models are capable of, you're going to find yourself in December of this year being like, holy crap, like what happened? Like I blinked and it went from this like novel little thing where I could write a poem about my dog having a picnic on the moon to something that like people are building businesses from. Like what happened when I blinked? And that's coming really quickly, to your point, because literally like every other day there's an update to Claude, like the desktop version, like almost every other day.
Yeah. And you and I both talk to nonprofits that or people at nonprofits that say like, well, I can't use it at work. Like they've forbid us from using AI at work. You still have the agency to try it personally, right? See all the things that you could do personally. And then you have the agency to say, hey, listen, I am being inefficient with my work. I could do this much more. So either we need to review and revise our AI policy to allow it to be used in some cases, or I'm going to have to go somewhere else to have the same level of impact that I'm making, but be more efficient in doing it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, let's move on to the next, I think, two other stories that are actually connected to each other because they have to do with humans and AI and who's good at what. So we'll start first with this Oxford study that came out. And again, my news feed, it's not about Taylor Swift. It's about the Oxford study that Save the Children did, where AI outperformed humans in like every single domain and in fundraising. And so the headlines were essentially AI is 3 times better at raising money than humans. And so that was a headline. And I actually waited a while to like respond to this because I actually wanted to read the article. Number one thing I did is I threw it in a Notebook LM. I created a video, audio podcast, and a slide deck because I was like, it's a very academic study at Oxford, obviously. And then I started interrogating it and I put it into Claude and I'm like, okay, but what didn't it do? Did it disclose that it was AI? No, it didn't. Was this actually an AI that was asking for money? No, in fact, it wasn't. It was actually a study where people were given a pound, a British pound, and they were then asked if they wanted to donate a percentage of it, any percentage of that pound, to charity. And when engaged, they actually tested human canvassers, so people who actually would approach you on the street and say, hey, do you want to, donate to this cause, Save the Children, versus a bot that was using text. So they had these human canvassers using text messages, and then they had a bot not saying that it was a bot, and they found out that the bot was far better at convincing people to take its point of view. There's nothing new about that. Like literally, you and I have shared this on this podcast for a few years that a bot is something like
Mhm.
82% more likely to convince you to take its point of view, which is really good when you want to quit smoking, but really bad when you don't want to be manipulated. So that's not
Mhm.
new. The study basically showed me that it was about scale, right? It's not about like bots being better than humans. It's about bots don't sleep. And if they're only trained to do that one thing and they're not disclosed as bots, then yeah, they're going to be more effective. There's nothing novel about that. So I think that just relates to one conclusion on one side of the argument is like humans are, now's the time. It's all going to be about future. The future is all about humans, and it's going to be about like shore up your relationships because that's where it's going to be because bots are just going to do their thing either way. And the other side, it's going to be like, nope, get rid of the humans and just use bots because they're better. And you and I obviously both think, and our entire book is built on the premise of human first, AI forward, where you have humans that are empowered by AI that can actually do more, do it faster, do it better, and be happier in the end. And that's basically the same principles show up in every study that's done around AI. But the other was an article that you found, or a couple articles on this kind of like this related side of like Amazon and Microsoft are rehiring humans. So, I mean, how do you think that plays in?
I mean, we saw this with ChatGPT or with OpenAI and Anthropic maybe like a year or two ago. They said that they were building consulting firms, right? Knowing that just building the tools is not enough, that they need to have forward deployed engineers, FDEs is the kind of the new role that was coming out to work with the organizations to create that bridge between the use case, the processes, and how do we implement the tool to get that work done, right? And we've seen this for a decade, right? We've deployed tools, we've deployed models, and we know that it's not up to the model that determines the success. It's up to the organization and how much they're going to use it. So here's what Microsoft, what AWS, I think Microsoft is investing 2.5 billion to create essentially like a consulting firm of its own, right? AWS is investing about $1 billion. We saw that Ford just rehired a bunch of humans to come back because they offloaded work to bots that weren't doing the work. They didn't have like the experiential
Judgment.
understanding of how these tools should be working, right? No matter how sophisticated it is, you need to have that human level understanding and kind of the creative process to think about how to put the tool to work, right? How to look at your current process, your current workflow, and then break it up into different pieces to say, here's where I could either do it quicker, do it more efficiently, do it faster, do it better, or do things that I couldn't have done before. But it's going to be up to like, I can assist in that, but it's never going to really understand what you do, no matter how well you explain it, without you having that element included.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting because we saw this with OpenAI a while ago where like, they're realizing that their risk is that they thought that people would just uptake AI on its own and that they would spend an hour a day and they would learn all the new things. They would stay up on the models and they would just become like, a second brain. That was the utopian version of, at least what they told all the investors. And what they found is that there's great risk in that because people actually don't like change. The models are diverging; they're getting harder to understand and to leverage than easier. I mean, there's still easy interface, but like the complexity of what they can do is beyond what most people know. I would say vast majority of people have a very outdated view of what AI already is, today versus what they think it is. And so they're like, oh, we got to hire all these humans to go tell the other humans that it's going to be okay and show them the way. And so that was funny. And then I saw another article today that Microsoft's laying off like 4,000 people. So they're like hiring all these people to teach humans, and then they're laying off a bunch of humans because, in certain areas. And I think that was such an anomaly a couple of years ago. I mean, most people know the story. Like my son was at AWS and got laid off when they did their very first the 18,000 layoff. And that was like such a big moment, but those cycles now happen all the time with every company. So it's just like a constant like rejiggering and reprioritizing areas and capital to new areas. And so, yeah, they're laying off, or they're hiring people, but they're laying off people because they're hiring different people for different types of work. And this goes back to like this inverted pyramid of work that I forget where it came from. I think it came from Palantir, actually, where they basically, we're not looking at people that do jobs anymore. We're looking at jobs that need to be done and then what AI can do what jobs, and then which people can manage the AI to do the jobs. And so this reconfiguring is all about like a firmer audit on like, what are the actual things that are going to move the needle? And I don't think the nonprofit sector is immune from that. I think the nonprofit sector will have to follow that, because if in fact in the last book, I was just reviewing this chapter right now, it's in the conclusion, is that if your organization was one day old and you just sat around and you're like, I'm trying to achieve this mission, would that organization look anything like the organization you work in today? Almost everyone's like, no, it wouldn't. Because if you had affordable and accessible AI and you're like, today is my organization's, one day, and we're going to achieve this thing, there's very little chance you're going to build all the structure and bureaucracy that your organization now basically needs to like survive. And so, I think that's where it's like looking at what jobs need to be done, what AI can support those jobs, and then what people that you'd hire to manage those jobs is a really, really big difference. I think that's the hard question that nonprofit the sector leaders are, should already be forced to ask today and should be willing to ask today.
Yeah, and there was another study that came out that I want to talk about, where even those who are using AI, right, like feel like it's transforming their job. This was Boston Consulting Group. They do an annual AI at work study, and it said 42% of regular AI users are saving 8 hours a week, so an entire workday, right, which is what we've talked about for a long time. But yet they haven't figured out what to do with their free time. And so a lot of them are just going back to, I'm sending out emails so much faster, now I get to send more emails, right? But like, that's not transforming your work, let alone your organization, right? And so there's this significant gap between how individuals are using AI and how transformative it is for them, but the organization is still saying exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Right. Sometimes even worse, because they're investing in these tools and they aren't seeing the overall benefit from it because it hasn't like transitioned from that individual to that organizational level. And I think that's going to be a big unlock for nonprofits as they continue to figure out like how to adopt this.
Yeah, no, I think absolutely. There's just a lot of lessons in there. And I think, everyone's on this journey. No one's got it figured out, but you've got to lean in and basically do the work, because it will pass you by, and it's going to pass you by, faster than you think it is. Now, obviously said from two people who work in AI, and we're obviously biased about this conversation, but I think we've seen organizations that have really, succeeded extremely well with AI because they actually asked the harder questions, and they then empowered people to actually leverage the tools to do work differently and not do more of it. But we've also seen the organizations that were like, oh, you can do work faster and you're just going to do more of it. And we're talking about a sector that's already burned out. That's just obviously it's going to increase the level of burnout. And we had one fundraiser. I don't know if you remember, we were working with one organization and this person came up and she was almost in tears, like, because we had done some training on AI, and she came up after and she was like, does this just mean they're just going to require more work from me? And I'm like, ideally, right, it takes more fortitude to say no, to say, okay, we're going to take that dividend of time and we're going to make sure that people are prioritizing the human things that only humans can do, like wisdom and discernment and really like the curiosity side of it. But I do think a lot of organizations aren't that far. And that's where led me to, and we can close on this. I wrote an article today, actually, because I was thinking about the Emperor's New Clothes. And so this is a scary peek at what's inside my brain. My very ADHD brain is I'll be working on something and I'll have completely disparate thoughts like all the time. It's like I've gotten used to living with like 12 television sets all on at the same time. But I've learned to pay attention to some of them. AI has been such a great way to like suss them out and suss these ideas out to see if they warrant anything. So this morning, I'm literally editing the last chapters of the book that will be coming out in October, and One Philanthropy, where all good books are sold. And I don't even know why, out of nowhere, like Emperor's New Clothes. And I'm thinking, Emperor's New Clothes, there's something about this that's like nagging at me. I wonder what it is. It's just one of the television channels that's going on in my head. So I like pause my editing. I go into Claude and I'm like, I just thinking about the Emperor's New Clothes. Like, does the idea of the Emperor's New Clothes have a relationship to fundraising, and why? Like, why is it in my head and why is it bothering me? And I end up exploring like 3 different ways that it is. And it turned out that I was bothered by a conversation I had recently, and this is a conversation you and I have had a lot, where it's like, hey, our organization is going to hire a company to help us build an AI system. What do you think? Should I hire this company or this company? And I'd be like, okay, well, it depends. Like, what are you trying to achieve? And it's like, well, we're going to go for the big swing. We're going to find the thing that AI is going to help us do, faster. And then my conversation would be like, well, what about your culture? And they're like, well, I hadn't really thought about our culture, but we just want to do this one thing so that we could tell everybody we did this thing. And so the Emperor's No Clothes is kind of this thing of like it's masquerading as like, this is going to solve your problem, but it's not. Like literally you will come back, because you and I've seen this like probably more than anyone in the country. We've seen organizations that buy the thing because it's like our board said we need to or whatever. We're going to buy the thing and we're going to put it there. But then there's going to be this like dismay and like the disillusionment about, oh, it didn't work. See, it didn't work. It was like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So anyway, I ended up writing this article about it, co-oping obviously with Claude, but it's such a good way to like, honestly, if you pay attention to the signals in your brain, if you have an idea that pops in your brain, don't let it go. Jot it down. Like my Apple Notes, I have like over 100 different Apple Notes, and I just tag them a certain way because a lot of times I'm not in front of my computer or whatever. But I think it's such a healthy way to like really explore and get curious about how things are connected and what we can learn together. Did I just scare you with a peek inside my brain?
I know how scary it is.
I know, unfortunately.
Waiting for the next article to drop, because that's he always got coming
I had
out.
the biggest compliment, and also maybe it wasn't intended to be a compliment. I took it as a compliment. It was probably a critique, because I get a few where it's like, I told you, I'm not interested in short form anymore. I just like, it takes me longer. I want to process, and these are more for me than you anyway. But one, it's like I'll put on LinkedIn, it's like, this is a very long article. It's 17-minute read. If you don't like that, put it into Notebook LM. And then I'll still get someone saying, you know what? I wanted to read your articles, but I don't have time. They're really long. And I literally just told you, like, don't read them. Put them in Notebook LM, like whatever. But the other one was somewhat last week, actually, because I think it was the one on the environment, which admittedly was even longer because I felt like it was justified and needed to be. But someone's like, oh my gosh, I have to like now carve out like literally on calendar on my every Friday afternoon time on my calendar to read your articles, which I don't know if it was intended to be a compliment, but I'll take it as one either way. But
I would take it as one.
I mean,
I would take it as one. You're writing stuff worth reading.
It is. I really work hard. And, you know, to be honest, you and I both know that I'm not a good writer. I've never felt like I was a good writer, never found joy in writing, but I find tremendous joy in co-creating and exploring lots of thoughts. And I even still, like the article on the environment took me, I mean, it probably took me 14 or 16 hours. Like it was not an easy article to write, but if I'd done it on my own without all that support, it would have taken 30 hours for sure to read everything. Plus, I would have hated every moment of it. Like it just would not have been a joy-filled experience.
Yeah. And I think that's a good summary of just like these tools allow you to do things that you don't really enjoy doing, right? And allow you to like unlock a part of you. You've always wanted to express those ideas and like put that out there, but just never liked the medium of having to write that and spend that time. And so now these ideas can be put out to the world. Like all the 12 televisions that are running through your head, you're putting 10 of them out a week, right? Because of the technology that is allowing you to do that.
Yeah. So shout out to Bart Lilly, who texted you and I think yesterday, is like, I like these two things. And I'm like, what is he talking about? And then I figured he has to be talking about the podcast. So you probably knew. I was like, which two things? Because we also don't know which episodes are being released when either. So it's awesome to have people like Bart who's actually paying attention. So at least one person's out there, you know, listening to what's going on.
Thanks, Bart.
Thanks, Bart. All right. We just left that Easter egg for him. All right. Well, Scott, you know, next week it's going to be a whole nother year in AI, and we'll just have to like hit it from there and see what happens, but continue on doing all the good stuff. And, you know, we'll catch you on the flip side.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for listening.
Take care.